So welcome to our today's class on global language. And in our previous few classes, we had been talking about the origin of several countries' language, especially Australian English, Canadian English, American English, Spanish English, and the other part, how these countries got acquaintance of English language, what is the pronunciation pattern of these languages. In this regard, today we will be discussing about the origin of English language, especially in Southeast Asian countries, Philippines, Singapore, and others countries. So if you have any questions, so please raise your hand and you can make your question, or you can put your question in the chat box. The territories in and to the west of South Pacific, it displays an interesting mixture of American and British English. British and American English, especially British colonial power, is spread all over the world. And for this reason, we see the tendency of using British English by the people all over the world. And apart from this, the America is the first English speaking country of the world. And for this reason, in some countries or in several territories of the world, we see the pronunciation pattern might be similar to American English as well with the British pronunciation. The main American presence emerged after the Spanish-American War that was happened in 1898, from which the USA received the island of Guam, the Puerto Rico in the Caribbean, and the sovereignty over the Philippines. We have understood that British, they had colony, and the American had also colonies all over the world. And in case of Philippines, in this Spanish and American War, America got the sovereignty over Philippines. And Philippines, officially, its name is the Republic of the Philippines. And it is a collection of several islands in the Southeast Asia and situated in the Western Pacific Ocean. And it consists of about 7,641 islands, and that are broadly categorized under three main geographical divisions from the north to south: Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. These are so the Philippines is consisted of nearly 8,000 islands. And after the Spanish and American War that was happened in 1848, America got sovereignty in this region. However, we have also understood that in the English used in this area had a mixture of American and British English. How it happened? The Spanish-American War actually happened in 1898, and hostilities began in the aftermath of the internal explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in Cuba, leading to US intervention to Cuban War of Independence. And this is, the location is Cuba, Puerto Rico, Caribbean Sea, Philippines, and Guam, South Asia. These are the history of the Spanish and American War. And the result is that America got victory. And in the Treaty of Paris that was conducted in 1898, founding of the first Philippine Republic and beginning of the Philippine American, the beginning of the Philippine American War. So next time, Hawaii, another island, was annexed at that time, also after a period of increasing US influence. And in 1940 decades, the US invention of Japanese held Pacific islands was followed after World War II by several areas being made the responsibility of the USA as United Nations trust territories. And second, after the Second World War, in this area, uh, British influence also came in this area. And the Philippines became independent in 1946, but the influence of American English remains strong. That means if we calculate the year, that means the American and Spanish War that took place in 1898, and Philippines got independence in 1946. Within this time frame, nearly 150 years, within this time frame, the people living in this area, that means in this nearly 8,000 islands, the people had been using the English that is quite similar to American English. And in this country has by far the largest population of the English speaking states in the region. Actually, in this Southeast Asian region, Philippines is the largest country on the basis of English speaking people. And in 2002, we see that 80 million people use English as their first language. It makes a significant contribution to the world totals. World totals means the world population who speak English language. So Philippines contributes much to the English speaking community or the people of the world. These are the territories where English is used in Southern Africa. You see the name of this country: Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania. These are South Africa, Botswana. These are the countries where English is used, either second language or either as first language. How British influence came in this area. British influence began through the voyages of English sailors at the end of the 18th century, notably the journeys of Captain Cook in 1770. Most probably, you haven't forgotten the name of Captain Cook. Captain Cook is the person who initiated British sailors towards Australia and New Zealand as well. So, at the end of the 18th century, the Captain Cook is spreaded, and Captain Cook with his sailors came in this area. And in case of Philippines, it is not an exception. When Captain Cook came in this area, British English influences came in this region. Apart from this, the London Missionary Society sent its worker to the island of the South Pacific 50 years later. So at the end of the 18th century, the British sailors came in this area guided by Captain Cook. And after 50 years, especially for the spreading of London Missionary Society, they came in this area. For these two regions, British English came in these islands. In Southeast Asia, the development of British colonial empire grew from the work of Stamford Raffles. So Captain Cook is a name related to Australia and New Zealand, but in case of Philippines, there is another person, his name came forward, that is Stamford Raffles, an administrator of the British East India Company. Centers were established in several locations, notably Penang, Malaysia, okay, and also Singapore, 1989. So Stamford Raffles, this is administrator of East India Company. He established centers in Penang, an important port city of Malaysia, and he established center in 1786, and then in Singapore 1819, and Malacca in 1824. Though this area was occupied by American government. So it is natural that the English used in this area is will have the pronunciation pattern that is quite similar to American English. However, for the cause of Stamford Rafford, he established centers in this area, Penang, Singapore, and Malacca. We also see the British influence in these territories. We have heard that Stamford Raffles is a former Governor General of the Dutch East Indies. Sir Thomas Stamford Bingley Raffles was a British statesman, lieutenant governor to the Dutch East Indian lieutenant, best known for his founding modern Singapore and the Strait settlements. So, Rampold's name is uh, remembered that he make the modern Singapore. He made modern Singapore. Within a few months, the population of Singapore had grown to over 5,000, and by the time the federated Malay states were brought together as a crown colony, English had come to be established throughout the region as the medium of law, administration, and was being increasingly used in other contexts. When British people came in this area, the tendency of using English language in the aspects of life, especially in administration and in medium of law, uh, uh, had been using, and this tendency was increased after the arrival of the British people in this area. A famous example is the English language daily newspaper, the Strait Times, which began publication in 1845. So, in the first slide, we have talked about that the English used in this area has a mixture of American and the British English. These are the historical legacy why we see the tendency of using British and American accent in this area. English inevitably and rapidly became the language of power in the British territories of Southeast Asia. Hong Kong Island was ceded to Britain in 1842 by the Treaty of Nanking. At the end of the First Opium War, and Cannon was added to it in 1860. That means Hong Kong surrendered to British government, and also Kowloon was also surrendered to a British government. And the new territories, which formed the largest part of the colony, were leased from China in 1898 for 99 years lease. Okay. Still, you see the tendency in Bangladesh that if you get lease of a government property or land, you will get lease of 99 years. In this regard, Hong Kong was taken as lease from China in 1998 for 99 years lease. Opium Wars and Qing Dynasty. Okay, so these are the two wars waged between Qing Dynasty and the Western powers in the mid 19th century. So what is Opium War? Opium War is the fight between Chinese dynasty, that means the Chinese government, and the European power who came in this area. The Qing dynasty, officially the Great Qing, was the last imperial dynasty of China. It was established in 1636, ruled China proper from 1644 to 1912. And it was preceded by the Ming dynasty, succeeded by the Republic of China. So Ming Dynasty, Qing Dynasty, and then you see at present the Republic of China. So China was never occupied by British government, okay, and the British people, not by the British and the American people. So in Indian subcontinent, we were under the British rule for 200 years. As you see, the Philippines in these islands, they were under the British rule, American rule for nearly 150 years. But in case of China, they didn't surrender. Actually, British people didn't occupy the empire of China. But they had war between the Chinese dynasty, especially the Qing dynasty, and uh, and after that, Hong Kong, it was a part of China. But in uh, 1898, Hong Kong was leased to British government for 99 years. Cannon encompasses the northern part of Hong Kong. Cannon also a part of Hong Kong on the mainlands across Victoria Harbour. Once a separate city, it was acquired by Britain in 1860 and returned to China with the rest of the colony in 1997. As we have learned that it was 99 years treaty, and for this reason, after 99 years, Cannon, accompanied by Hong Kong, this was handed over to China. It's now a shopping, arts, and entertainment district. Stores 9 Nathan Road, white traditional markets offer goods for flowers, goldfish to clothes and jade. So this is about Kowloon. Kowloon. Kowloon is a part of Hong Kong. With the treaty, Hong Kong and Kowloon were included to the British government, but in 1997, they were released and they got in the sovereignty to China. Towards the end of the 19th century, the several territories in this region become British protectorates. Protectorates, that means not direct rule, they were under the British government. The administration of some being later taken over by Australia and New Zealand. So we have learned that there are nearly 8,000 islands in this area. So many territories in this area came under British protectorate, that means British government, and some were included with Australia and New Zealand. Territories with England as part of their heritage, which have become independent in recent decades, includes American Samoa, Palau, Fiji, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, North Mariana Islands, Samoa, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. So these are, so some islands went under the role of Australia and New Zealand, but some territories came under the British heritage. Just you see the name on the screen. And this is the political history, but how English language came in the common language or came in as a language uses territory, especially in the educational system. The British educational system exposed learners to a standard British English model very early on. British, they splitted their colony, and in some reason they had an intention that they will rule the country, and for this reason they introduced, that means the British colonial power, they introduced their standard English towards the people where they were on power. English medium school began in Penang. Penang also, we have heard the name of this city. Penang is a port city of Malaysia. English medium school first established in Penang in 1816, with senior teaching staff routinely brought in from Britain. Still in case of British Council, all over the world, you see the British Council, they are supposed to teach English language all over the world. But in case of Penang, they established English medium school, And in those English medium school, the staff, especially the teachers, senior teachers, were hired from Britain. Although at the outset these schools were attended by only a tiny percentage of population, as you see in case of Bangladesh, the more than 10 to 15% students, or 10 to 5 to 10% students of the total student population of the country, they attend English medium school. The scenario of Penang is not a different. Only a less number of students started using English medium school as their education. And numbers increased during the 19th century as waves of Chinese and Indian immigrants entered the area. So, towards the uh, during the 19th century, also in this area, especially in Penang, Chinese and Indian immigrants started to come. And at that time, people uh, living in Penang, they started to go English medium in a large number. English rapidly became the language of professional advancement and the chief literary language. Soon after the turn of the century, higher education through the medium of English was also introduced. So, in the same way, English medium instructed or English language instruction education started in Penang. The language thus became a prestige lingua franca among those who had received an English education and who had thereby entered professional society. So English language in this area um, got a prominence, and the people who would learn English language well, especially the British English, it was thought that it is a language of prestige. Still, such kind of tendency you see in our area, in our region, in Bangladesh, that if anybody can speak good English, that is a prestige. Okay, and it is an extension that nowadays this is a growing tendency to go to the version school. Version school, the curriculum, the text, all are the Bangladesh education curriculum. However, the language used in this educational institute is English. That is the version school. So the same scenario we notice in Penang, Malaysia. That is, uh, learning English language, it is a matter of prestige. People thought in such a way. Despite the common colonial history of the region, a single variety of Southeast Asian English has not emerged. Okay. Actually, we have learned that Australia got a distinctive English language variety. New Zealand, sometimes Maori is there, but uh, Maori and other, apart from the Maori language, we see that the language of English language used in New Zealand is quite similar to Australian English. In case, we also see the pronunciation pattern of Indian English, that is also a special category. But in case of this English language used in this area, they didn't have a special category. The political histories of Singapore and Malaysia, especially since independence, have been too diverse for these to happen, and the socio-linguistic situation of Hong Kong and Papua New Guinea are unique. And English language visits Singapore. In 1950 decades, a bilingual education system was introduced in Singapore, with English used as a unifying medium alongside Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. So we have understood that in Singapore and in this area, the immigrant from they came from China and also from uh, India. However, the Singapore was once upon a part of uh, China. So we see Chinese language, Malay language, and Tamil language. But English language, it has become a unifying force that to understand that uh, English can the English language learning population can communicate with the population who knows Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. However, English remained the language of government, the legal system, that retained its importance in education and in media. So, and for this reason, English is the second language in Singapore. English is the second language in India. English is the second language in Malaysia. That is not in Bangladesh. English is not the second language because in the legal system, in the government, education and the media, we don't use English language. Its use has also been steadily increasing among the general population. This is the history of Singapore English. And in 1975 survey, it's a very interesting survey. Only 27% of the people over age 40 claim to understand English. Whereas among 15 to 20 years old, the proportion was over 87%. So 87% young boys and girls who aged between 15 to 20 years, they can use English language quite good. However, the people who are more than 40 years of age, only 27% people can use English. And this survey was done in 1975. And there is also evidence of quite widespread use in family settings, a new local variety known as Singlish. Singlish, that means it is not, it is Singaporean English, Singapore English. Okay, so the pronunciation pattern that is quite different to Australian English, New Zealand English, British English, and American English. The country had a population of around 4.3 million in 2002. This is the history of Singapore English. And what's about Malaysia? The situation is very different in Malaysia, where following independence in 1957, Bahasa, Malaysia, so Bahasa is the name of Malaysian language, was adopted as the national language. Actually, we know that after getting independence, the regional language or the Aboriginal language gets priority. So in case of Malaysia, it is not an exception. After getting independence in 1957, Bahasa became the national language, and the role of English language accordingly became more restricted. Okay, so Malay medium education was introduced with English an obligatory subject, but increasingly being seen as a value of international rather than intra-national purposes, more a foreign language than a second language. So in case of Malaysia, so the Malaysia situation is quite similar to the situation of Bangladesh. You see that in case of the education system, you introduced Malay language, that means the Bahasa language. However, English is a compulsory subject. In case of Bangladesh, we see that from class 1 to 12, we have a subject which that is the compulsory English subject. So this is the scenario we noticed in Malaysia. However, English language got prominent in case of international communication, not intranational, not within the nation, but outside the nation. So nation to nation, not within the nation. English language is not a second language in Malaysia. It is a foreign language or international language in Malaysia. However, the traditional prestige attached to English still exists for many speakers. The country had a population of over 22 million in 2002. The location of territories in Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, where English is used, you can, we know this, Australia, New Zealand, Pacific, these are the countries where English language is used. What's about the Hong Kong? English has always had a limited use in the territories associated with the government or military administration, law, business, and the media. Chinese, the Cantonese is the mother tongue of over 98% 98% population of Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, we know the history that Hong Kong was included in China, but in 1998 there was a treaty that Hong Kong came under the British government as a 99 years lease, and for this reason the most people living in Hong Kong, they use Cantonese. That means it is a Chinese version of language. Okay, that means Chinese language, Cantonese, Mandarin. These are the Chinese language. So the people living in Hong Kong, 98% people, they use Cantonese. However, in recent years, there has been a major increase in educational provision, with estimates suggesting that over a quarter of the population uh, have some competence in English. So global lingua franca in English. So the necessity and the urgency to learn English language is also same to Hong Kong. And for this reason, through the years, the people started to learn English language. Though 98% people living in Hong Kong, they use Cantonese language, but uh, at present, 1/4 of the population, they can they can use English language for international communications. English and Chinese have joint official status, but Chinese predominates in most speech situation, often with a great deal of language mixing. There is uncertainty surrounding the future of role of English following the 1997 transfer of power, and though patterns of language use so far have shown little change. So this is the history of Hong Kong um, English, or the history of English language in Hong Kong. Papua New Guinea, another country. British sailor visited this territory as early in 1793, and Britain and Germany annexed area in 1884. British New Guinea was transferred to Australia in 1904 as the territory of Papua. German New Guinea was mandated to Australia in 1921. The two areas merged after World War II and became independent in 1975. There was a population of nearly 5 million in 2002, and about half our people speak Tok Pisin, a English-based pidgin. So Papua New Guinea, a language is used. Its name is Tok Pisin. So English-based pidgin, we know the definition of pidgin language, as a second language, and some have it as a mother tongue. It has a nationwide presence, widely seen in advertisement and the press, and heard on radio and television. What it is, that is the Tok Pisin. Many major works have been translated into Tok Pisin, including Shakespeare and the Bible. So this is the history of Papua New Guinea language. So this is in short the history of South Asian region country. So if we consider that especially the Philippines once upon a time was occupied by American government under the Spanish war, and after the nearly 150 years, this nearly 800 islands were under the rule of American government. But the British people started to came in this area, and they came as a sailors, especially uh, the Captain Cook came first in this area, who occupied the power of Australia and New Zealand. And next time, Stamford Raffles, he also came in this area, and he established Singapore as a modern country. So in this area, what we see that in Philippines, Singapore, Hong Kong, Papua New Guinea, there is a mixture of American English and British English. So thank you very much for attending the class. And next time we will be talking about the other